here's the next question or concern that we had. We have seen much criticism regarding the rushed rollout and implementation of Common Core. We know that input from stakeholders is critical for the success of the revisions, and given the fact that the revised regulations were developed during the summer, and we're not sure who those responsible for developing them were, the question is, do you foresee the same issues and backlash that we experienced with the Common Core rollout? Mind going first? Yes, okay. Dr. Rassani, would you mind?
No, I would, I'm going to say a couple of different things. Clearly, if you look at Common Core, there are so many moving parts, so many good things, so many negative things, and so many things that are misunderstood. I think there is a collective responsibility. There is credit to go around, there's blame to go around, and I'm disappointed on a lot of levels. I'm disappointed in our governor for not displaying what I would believe is appropriate leadership in this area. I think he's danced around this and has made this more of a challenge than it needed to be. I'm disappointed in some of my legislative colleagues who have engaged in hyperbole and behavior that I don't think is conducive to the appropriate education of children. I also think that we need to raise the level of the dialogue in terms of teaching and education as a profession. Teachers are denigrated far too often, maligned, and not given appropriate credit for the incredible work they are supposed to do, and in many respects achieve on a regular basis. And when I say teachers, I mean by extension people who are actually running the schools as well. So the supervisors and administrators are an absolutely critical component in that equation. In relation to Common Core, the phrase that I've come back to more often than not is very well intended, very poorly executed. And we took corrective action. The Senate held a series of 5 statewide hearings, got input from all aspects of this debate. There was no one side versus the other. And we pushed legislation working in concert with the Assembly, interest groups, the governor's office, and made some changes in the budget that are positive. They're not perfect, but there are a lot of positive things that were done. We addressed things like privacy, testing, the effect on students, what it would mean on their transcripts, would it be permanent or not, what is going to be the appropriate level of testing, and also too, I think we tried to find some appropriate level of comfort for parents. And you all know by the end of the session we worked on issues involving modifications to APPR, so that the goal was to provide guidance and oversight and accountability to teachers to make them better at their craft, not to play gotcha, so that in the end result we would have children who are receiving a better and more appropriate public education. Am I concerned on this? Yes, I am. And I'm concerned, and probably in a little bit weirder of a way, because again, this is not going to engender the type of commotion that Common Core will, in my estimation. Now we have a perfect example. I represent all of Smithtown. I represent a portion of Sachem. I see Cheryl Pedicic in the back. I represent about 97% of Three Village. In Three Village in Smithtown, this is going to be far less of a problem than it will be in a Sachem or Brentwood or other school districts. So you're not going to have a commonality of interest in many ways. And you know, I think one of the things that Stephanie said, which is extremely apt, is we tend to, as a state, and it's a collective, but it's the department and the regions, they take action based on a global view of the world, and we don't often give waivers or exceptions to people who are meeting their obligations already. If you're doing it well, you're graduating students, and it seems to be working fine, and there's no hue and cry that things need to be radically changed, why can't we do it like that and hone in with more specificity on those areas that have more significant problems? I'll give you a perfect example and then I'll stop. If we tried to get high-performing school district exempted from certain requirements from the state of New York, the first thing that happens is that we are called racist and bigots, and we're discriminatory because it's the haves and the have-nots, and that is absolutely, nothing could be further from the truth. That's not the way I think, that's not the way I advocate, but if you have school districts that are doing it well, that should be recognized. So again, going back to this, I think the cost factor is going to be what is going to get everybody's attention. Now, John, I will add one final thing. If you look at this, I have a memo from State Ed, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but it lays out The first time this came up was in December of 2011 at the Regents. There were work groups put together, there were 100 stakeholders involved, there were 1,600 responses, there was a comment period, there were modifications made, and I could easily jump on and thrash SED and say they shouldn't have had a comment period during the summer, but during that time period there were 100 comments. And you could say there should have been a lot more. So the timing thing, I'm less concerned about than the actual regulations that are advanced. So if they did it in the summer and it worked out well, no one would care about the fact that they did it in the summer. So I just think that we need to recognize that this has been almost a 3-year process. Now, there is one component in this memo that will make certainly Stephanie and others chuckle. There is a section in here that says staff has identified to the Regents places where districts are going to be able to save money. See, I told you you'd get a kick out of that. But that there would be some commensurate costs for certain districts. So I'd love to find the components that would, because I'm sure you would all love to find the areas where you could actually save money. But this is a collective effort, and if we do need to intervene and help in some way to make it better, I don't think we'll hesitate to do that.
Thank you, Senator Flanagan. And I recognize the point that you made that it may not have the same backlash as Common Core based on the fact there are districts like, a Smithtown that won't have the population that a district of Hempstead's caliber might have. So that's an important point to recognize. Dr. Rastani?
Right, no, I would agree with that. And one of the things that I think probably prompted some of the revisions is the fact that this is a group that traditionally is reticent to come to the school. So therefore, yes, someone had to advocate for their civil rights. So yes, it was right for the state education department to try to do something more for a group that traditionally shies away from coming to speak with us at school. So that being said, I do agree with the senator. I don't feel that, especially in my community, that there will be a tremendous backlash or hue and cry regarding the implementation. But even in a district where there's going to be a substantial impact, you're not going to get that hue and cry. These are not the parents that come to a board meeting. These are not, and not that we wouldn't want these parents to come and advocate for their children. I sit at board meetings every week, and every other week I should say, and we hope that more people would come and be informed and learn about all the good ways that the Senate and the Assembly and the regions do support education. But people only come when they come with a flashpoint. So I don't think there will be that same backlash as there was with Common Core, and I won't even go into the whole Common Core thing. I'll just digress to my neighbor to the left.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Looking at the idea of the timeline for rolling this out, I think part of when you really start to read through the regulations, of course we in Sachem have concerns about the bilingual piece and the fact that we're talking about having to run 3 bilingual sections, and by next September find quality candidates, develop a program that we've never reached before, perform outreach to our parents because they have not had this option before, when this is the default program for their kids. They're not opting into bilingual, they're opting out of bilingual and into ENL, so the default for them is this bilingual program. So it's educating parents who really don't come to the schools, as you said, and really look at that piece. But the piece that we're looking at beyond that is the idea of really looking at that integrated English piece, and really looking at how this affects the ENL for all learners, because our population for bilingual, we're really looking at affecting about 60 kids possibly, if they choose to go with that program. When we're looking at the idea of following the mandates and similar to to Common Core and going through this, we really don't have the time right now to provide the professional development, because first we have to select the teachers that we feel are appropriate to teach in this collaborative environment. Ideally, in the regulations, it says that if a teacher has that certificate of English teaching, let's say, for example, an ESL, they can teach that class on their own. They don't even need the support of an ESL teacher in there. But I will tell you, we do not have a lot of teachers who hold that dual certificate. So what we're looking at right now is really having the time to select the right people. Looking at the time to hire the right ESL people. I right now have a department of 11, and in order to really make this work truly, I'd have to double my department. So I'd have to look to hire at least 11 teachers, to make this work. And the pool is not great out there. So we don't have a lot of people to pick from. And we're all competing for those same people graduating from those same colleges. when you're thinking about the idea of rolling this out and looking at proper staff development, you've got the two pieces of this, of looking at it from an elementary lens, where we're going to have teachers that, for the first time in an elementary level, we're going to have to cluster those kids into all one elementary class. We're going to have to provide staff development for the elementary teacher who has all those kids clustered, as well as for our ESL teachers, because this is a different methodology than we're used to. They're going to be pushing into that classroom for their kids to be successful. So they're going to look at that piece. And we're talking about right now in Sachem, we've got 12 elementary schools, and in those elementary schools you have K to 5, grade levels that need to really be looked at. And you really are supposed to push in when your kids are learning English. So we're talking about the idea of implication of rolling this out on a timeline. We're thinking about the idea of having to have a master schedule where all of this can work with one support person in the building. When we look at the idea on a secondary level, right now we're fortunate that not only are we providing mandated support for our kids, but we are providing non-mandated push and support into other content area classes in our middle schools and our high schools to help our kids to be successful in math, in science, in classes that traditionally may not have been looked at as language rich, but they are now. And we really our students really need that support. When we worked out mock schedules for next year and really looked at that IE component, the only thing that our ESL teachers are going to be able to do is to teach their grade level courses, their ESL, and push into English. And that's going to be their day. When we look at this and we plan even the rollout, part of what I have questions on this is now they're saying that ENL kids have to be in grouping that has 2 contiguous grade level spans in it. So for example, I can put a first grader with a second grader, but I can't put a first grader with a third grader. So when we talk about rolling this out and trying to make it work, I do believe that if we look at timeline, and we look at the way that the Common Core rolled out, for us to sit down and figure out the implications on a master schedule, for us to sit down and figure out the implications for kids. Some of our kids get other services. Some of our kids may be in other classes. I don't know, honestly, how we can look at a building and really make this schedule work for kids. And I think that if it was a timeline where we weren't necessarily mandated to have this up and running by 15, 16, but it could be a gradual rollout, or we could try some of our best practices, we could really develop a quality program. But right now, I feel like all we're looking to do is hire people to put them in the spot and hope they sink or swim. And that is something that, we would hope that from Common Core we learn the idea of a gradual rollout and really looking at best practices. That's not what's going on with this current plan.